Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Steve Brown. I'm with Atlantic Computing. I'm joined by my associate Kevin Dowd, President of Atlantic, and Bob Richter, President of E-Rate Provider Services. Today we're going to learn about the significant forthcoming changes in the E-Rate program, aka E-Rate modernization, aka E-Rate 2.0. This is a bummer side of the news page. The modernization is going to negatively impact funding for products and services that many of you presently are buying or subscribe to. On the bright side, the changes will also hopefully bring funding to products and services you aspire to buy or subscribe to. In case you haven't heard, the go-forward emphasis is clearly on robust Wi-Fi in schools. And that's what we do. That's what Atlantic Computing does. You'll hear more about developments from Atlantic relative to the E-Rate modernization towards the end of the meeting from Kevin. Just to set expectations, the content we plan to cover today shouldn't last more than 45 minutes. We are open to fielding questions as we go along, and we'll address them periodically throughout the presentation and at the end as well. There is a GoToMeeting interface on the right side of your screen that will allow you to submit questions when the webinar is over, or if you need to exit the event early, you can select Leave Webinar from the File pull-down menu in the upper left portion of your screen. For those of you that don't know us, Atlantic Computing is very focused on state-of-the-art Wi-Fi in schools. We engineer, we implement, and we provide frontline support. Here in Connecticut, we have over 150 schools representing 35 districts where we've deployed full ubiquitous Wi-Fi. We also have an extensive track record within the independent school sector and higher education as well. We have our SPIN. We've had our SPIN for over 3 years. We've fulfilled E-Rate funded business quite successfully. We have a wonderful reputation that often precedes us. Today we're joined by Bob Richter, our subject matter expert, confidant, and full stop authority on everything E-Rate. Bob is the president of E-Rate Provider Services. From 1996 to 2003, Bob was the executive director of technical services for the Hartford school system, where he had direct responsibility for all of Hartford's E-Rate activity. From 2004 to 2009, Bob was the National E-Rate Program Executive at IBM, where he established IBM's E-Rate Center of Excellence. This unit was responsible for more than $650 million in E-Rate funding commitments. E-Rate Provider Services is a full-service consulting firm that helps service providers like Atlantic navigate the E-Rate program. We are very grateful to have Bob working with Atlantic and to have him be here today to bring his E-Rate experience and expertise to you. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn the controls over to Bob and let him take it from here.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. So, what is E-Rate? The short background is it was created by the Telecommunications Reform Act of 1996. It is administered by the Universal Service Administration Company, otherwise known as USAC, under the guidance of the FCC. It provides subsidies for eligible services. It's currently at $2.4 billion as of funding year 2014. It is a discount program, meaning generally the money flows to the service provider, not to the applicant like a grant program. The USAC has 4 different divisions. There's high cost, low income, rural health, and schools and libraries. Schools and Libraries Division, or SLD, is the division of USAC that administers the E-Rate program. Funds are committed to 2 different categories of service. There's Category 1 service and Category 2 service, formerly known as Priority 1 and Priority 2 services. Funds are committed to Category 1 first, and if there's funds remaining, those funds are committed to Category 2. In short, Category 2 gets the leftover funds after all the funds for Category 1 are committed. Funding year starts July 1st and goes to June 30th. For example, funding year 2014 is July 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2015. Eligible services in the E-rate program are divided into two categories, Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 services consist of telecommunication services, telecommunications, and internet access services. In short, those services that connect school buildings and library buildings to each other and to the internet. And then Category 2 services, formerly Priority 2 services, which connect students in a school or library to the outside world. Essentially, cabling, network electronics, those types of services within a building, and the maintenance of those services. Category 2 products include switches and routers, network electronics, wireless LAN controllers, wireless access points, cabling, connectors, related components, racks and patch panels, faceplates, wire mold, those types of miscellaneous equipment, the racks that support eligible equipment, uninterruptible power supplies for basic power protection of eligible equipment, caching service, firewalls, software necessary to support eligible equipment, including client access licenses, improvements to eligible equipment, and the maintenance contracts included with eligible equipment. Previously in the program, wireless services could be purchased by an applicant in an internal connections request. Essentially, the applicant would put in a request for access points, cabling, hubs, routers, switches, all the equipment necessary to do a full wireless Wi-Fi deployment. Service provider would come in, install the equipment, install the cabling, make sure it was all up and running, do the configuration, give them a diagram of what they had done. They would receive a sign-off, service provider would get paid, applicant would then own the equipment. Essentially, the applicant would own the equipment, the applicant would manage and maintain the equipment. As of the new eligible services list, there are two additional options available to applicants. The first option is the service provider owns and installs the equipment provides and installs the equipment as before, but retains title to that equipment and provides all the maintenance and network monitoring for that network. And then there's a hybrid model where the applicant owns the equipment, but the service provider can manage it for them. One interesting note is break fix of equipment remains responsibility of the entity that owns the equipment. So if the service provider owns the equipment in the first model, then the service provider can provide the break fix of that equipment. But if the applicant owns the equipment, the service provider can manage it and monitor it, but the applicant needs to provide the break fix services or can outsource that under a separate contract. Basic maintenance of eligible internal connections include repair and upkeep of eligible equipment on a time and materials basis, wiring and cabling maintenance on a time and materials basis, and then configuration changes, basic technical support, software upgrades and patches, adds, moves, and changes, those types of services. The last three, configuration changes, the technical support, and software upgrades, can be done on a fixed price basis with no need to show work performed, where break fix, time and materials, then you need to show, the service provider needs to show hours spent on task. We have this chart to show what the E-rate process looks like. Before bids are submitted, there's some work that needs to happen. The eligible services list needs to be released. The application window is generally defined or announced, and then the applicant needs to file a Form 470, generally accompanied with an RFP. The Form 470 is essentially a bid announcement in most cases, although based on local procurement rules, it can be used as a standalone procurement device if state and local procurement allows that. The Form 470 is filed online. It must be left available for 28 days minimum. It can be longer, but it cannot be shorter. And price needs to be the most highly weighted factor. Price does not need to be 50% of the bid evaluation. It can be 30% or 20% or whatever the applicant decides, but no other single criteria can be more highly weighted than price. Once all the bids are submitted, all the bids are reviewed, service provider is selected, and a contract is written, and then the applicant files the Form 471, which is the actual application that gets filed online for USAC to review. The difference between the Form 470 and the Form 471 is the Form 470 says, we are the Meriden Public Schools. We would like wireless in our schools. We have 10 schools. Here's our discount. Please provide a solution. Where the Form 471 says, we are the Meriden Public Schools. We have 10 schools. Here are our discounts. We would like to hire Atlantic Computing to put in 100 access points per building for our buildings. They're going to charge us X amount per access point. They're going to provide labor. They're going to provide project management, all the services that they provide. So the Form 470 is a request for information or request for proposals. The Form 471 with a signed contract is the document that tells USAC what it is that you're looking for exactly with the attached bill of materials. Once the Form 471 is filed, it goes into review. There's PIA review, which is the Program Integrity Assurance, which essentially is the group that examines every aspect of the request. They look at the eligibility that the district is claiming or the applicant is claiming. They look at the services to make sure that they're eligible. They look at the intended usage to make sure it's for eligible purposes. They conduct selective reviews or in-depth reviews on occasion. And after the end of a very thorough, sometimes lengthy review, they issue a funding commitment decision letter, which essentially says, yes, we will fund the request. No, we will not fund the request. Or sometimes, if they find one small feature that they deem ineligible, they'll decrement that small feature or the small amount of money and fund the rest. At this point, the applicant files a Form 486, which tells the tells USAC that they intend to proceed with the project and authorizes them to pay invoices, and then services start. Invoicing is done in one of two ways. In the past, there has been a BEAR form or a SPI form. So the BEAR form, the Billed Entity Applicant Reimbursement Form, is used when the applicant pays 100% of the cost of the service and then receives a refund check for their discounted percentage. The SPI form is used when the applicant only wants to pay their discounted percentage. So if a service is going to cost $10,000 for the year and the applicant receives a 90% discount, the applicant will, for the BEAR form, the applicant will pay the $10,000, file the BEAR form. In the past, the check has gone to the service provider for $9,000, who turns around and pays it to the applicant. So the BEAR form, the applicant pays $10,000, receives $9,000 back. Used mostly when the applicant wants to receive the services before getting a funding commitment decision. For example, if they want to get it over the summer and the SLD has not completed their review, they'll often pay upfront or pay the full cost and then receive a rebate check when the funding commitment is received. The SPI form is used with the same numbers for the job, $10,000 for the service, 90% discount. The SPI form is used when the applicant wants to pay just their $1,000, and then the service provider invoices the USAC directly. One of the changes I will talk about in a few moments is, as of funding year 2016, BEAR forms will be submitted, or BEAR checks will be submitted directly to the applicant. So there's a 1 year grace period for the applicants to get their financial information into USAC, and then BEAR forms, the rebate checks will go directly to the applicant and not go through the service provider, which is a significant change from past practice. A different graphical representation of the E-rate funding year 2015 timeline. Since we're about at the beginning of November, the final ESL was released a couple days ago. Applicants can start filing their Form 470s on July 1st, 2014, generally used for large statewide networks that have a much longer ramp up in evaluation time. Draft eligible services list was released on August 4th, comment date of September 3rd, reply comment date of September 18th. The final ESL was released on October 28th, just a few days ago. They have not released the rest of the dates for the funding year 2015 funding cycle, but we estimate that they will open the filing window January 1st, that they will close it mid to late March, and then Category 2 installations can begin April 1st, 2015. Category 1 services can begin July 1st, 2015. Any questions on this part of the presentation so far? We want to leave a slide for folks to ask questions before I move on to some of the changes. Okay, if there are none, what has changed in the E-rate modernization order? Let's talk about a few general program changes first. First of all, the discount calculations. In the past, schools have and libraries have calculated their discounts differently. A school district would calculate the discount for each individual school. Essentially, they would take the simple average of children eligible for free or reduced lunch, divide that by the total students in that school, and compare that with a discount matrix. What this would do is yield a result where different schools in the same district would have different discounts. You might have some 90% schools, some 80% schools, some 60% schools, etc. Generally, if 75% of the children in a school are eligible for free or reduced lunch, that school would get a 90% discount. 50 to 74.99%, the school would get an 80% discount, etc. Now, what they've done is they've decided that the fact that one school in a district would buy at a different discount than another school is not representative of school funding, which generally, in most of the country, all the funds go to the central office and it's dispersed on a per pupil basis, regardless of where the school is in the district. And in fact, there are targeted Title I funds that go to the poorer schools. So on a per pupil basis, frequently, the poorer schools have more money than the schools in the richer areas. So they decided for simplicity purpose and for fairness purpose that they would change that method. So now what a district would do is take all of the eligible students district-wide, divide that number by the total students in the district, and take that simple average and compare it versus the discount band, the discount matrix, and arrive at a single total or single percentage that the district would purchase at for all of their schools. For example, if in a particular district with 3 schools, each of 1,000 students, School A has 800 eligible kids, School B has 600 eligible kids, and School C has 400 eligible kids. In the past, the first school with 800 out of 1,000 or 80% would get a 90% discount. The second school with 600 kids out of 1,000 or 0.6 would get an 80% discount, and the third school with 400 kids eligible out of 1,000 kids or 0.4 would get a 60% discount. Now, you would take the 800 kids plus the 600 kids plus the 400 kids, or 1,800 children out of 3,000 would be a 60% discount, or sorry, a simple average of 0.6 compared to the discount matrix would mean the entire district would buy at 80%. Funding priority, if the USAC cannot fund, they run out of money before they can fund an entire band, then they would fund within that band based on the simple average. So a district with a 98% average would be funded before a district with a 97% average, before a district with a 96% average, etc. What is a school district? It may seem like a silly question, but historically, school districts are composed of many different types of entities. You've got Hartford Public School District, which has 35 schools, all within the same geographic area. But then you have a school district like CREC, Capital Region Education Council, which administers schools in many different geographies, or the state VOTEC school system, vocational technical school system. So they look at the CREC schools as a single administrative entity. So all the CREC schools would buy the same discount, and the VOTEC schools would work the same way. And again, centralized library systems would be the same way, regardless if they're in one area, one geography, one municipality, or they're spread out. Other changes. Document retention requirements have been increased from 5 years to 10 years. Contract signature requirements have been eased. As I discussed earlier, applicants must receive bear discounts directly from USAC starting in funding year 2016. The eligible products database program has been terminated. It was not particularly useful, and it wasn't maintained well by service providers. And rather than varying number of invoice deadline extensions, service providers or applicants can receive a one-time 120-day invoice deadline extension, which will be automatically granted, but no other extensions will be granted. So, Category 1 specific changes. These will indirectly affect Category 2. The purpose of the following changes are the USAC wants to reduce the amount of money that Category 1 takes up, because Category 1 has been increasing since about 1996. I think it was $800 million in requests. Sorry, 1998. It's been increasing about $113 million on average every year, to the point where Category 1 requests have essentially grown to consume all of the fund and plus some. Because Category 1 requests are funded first, and Category 2 requests are funded with the leftovers, if there is no money left over, then there are no Category 2 requests that are funded. And this was the case in funding year 2013 and in funding year 2014. No Category 2 or Priority 2 requests were funded because Category 1 or Priority 1 requests exceeded the funding cap. So to reverse this, the FCC in the modernization order decided to phase out or phase down a number of services that were previously eligible but will either no longer be eligible or will be less eligible year after year. The first of those would be voice services. Voice services are being phased out beginning in funding year 2015. It will be a 20-point reduction each year. So for example, if your district has a 90% discount, you will get a 90% discount on your on your internet access service, but you'll get a 70% discount on your voice services, your local and long distance, your hosted voice services, whatever voice you use. You get 90% this year, 90% on internet access, 70% on voice this year, 50% on voice next year, 30% the year thereafter, unless they stop the process, which they may do. The FCC did leave room in the order to stop this process after 2 years. Legacy telephone features have been eliminated: paging, texting, directory assistant services. They have eliminated hosted email services, web hosting services, and voicemail. And they have put special eligibility conditions on the wireless data plans and air cards. So a cellular data plan is now eligible only when it is the most cost-effective way to connect students. They have essentially created the presumption that cellular data plans are never the most cost-effective way to connect students in a school, but they can be the most cost-effective way to connect folks in a mobile book van or some other special use requirement. But essentially, we project that they're not going to fund cellular data plans in a school ever again. In point of fact, they may go back to past requests and start collecting the money back that they gave out for cellular data plans over the last few years. Category 2 changes. The FCC has found an additional $2 billion, $1 billion each for 2015 and funding year 2016. They're looking at a target annual budget for Category 2 of $1 billion. They found that $1 billion for this year and next year. They have not yet for the years thereafter. And they have put in a budget cap. They put in a 5-year Category 2 budget maximum of $150 per student, or $2.30 per square foot in libraries. This is a rolling budget and essentially eliminates the 2 and 5 rule. They've also put a maximum discount on Category 2 services of 85% and established a floor, a minimum of Category 2 support of $9,200 for smaller districts or smaller libraries. So what this means is if you have a school that has 1,000 children, that school has a 5-year budget of $150,000 for Category 2 services. There is no budget for Category 1 services. That $150,000 is the maximum that school can receive over 5 years. They can receive $150,000 in year 1 and receive nothing year 2, 3, 4, or 5. They can receive $75,000 in year 1, $75,000 in year 3, and then no more until year 6, or they can receive $30,000 a year every single year. It's up to the applicant how they wish to break that up. In addition, the $150,000 a year is a pre-discount amount, meaning a school with a 90% discount will get $135,000 in real discounted money, where a school with an 80% discount would get $120,000. So the $150,000 is a pre-discount amount. Note the Category 2 maximum discount of 85%. So going back to our model school with a 90% discount, this school could conceivably have 3 different discounts. A 90% discount for their internet access, an 85% discount for their Category 2 services, and a 70% discount for their Category 1 voice services. They have removed voice and video components from Category 2 funding year 2015 eligible services list, meaning no PBXs, no codecs, no MCUs, no gateways, no cabling for voice. Managed internal broadband is eligible in funding year 2015, includes managed local area network and wireless local area network, and they moved the installation dates of Category 2 from July 1st back to April 1st to give service providers an additional few months to be able to stage equipment and install it into schools. Any questions on this part of the presentation before I turn it over to Kevin?
Bob, we are having difficulty viewing the questions come at us. Unless you've been so incredibly succinct and on point that there have been no questions, but I doubt that's the case. So what I'm going to suggest is that the audience email me these questions and we will answer them. So send them to my email address, sbrown@atlantic.com, and we will respond to all.
Well, the nice thing about being on having all the participants on mute is I can imagine thunderous applause without actually having to hear it. So it's a good thing. Kevin, we'll turn this over to you.
All right, this is Kevin Dowd speaking. I just have 3 slides. I won't take too much time up. The basic message here is that under Category 2, many of the services and products that our customers you have obtained from us in the past are going to be part of this E-rate Category 2 next revision. That includes controllers and access points and the licenses, the installation effort, including wiring and switches to support the access points, configuration, and support. You'll see there are a couple asterisks next to monitoring software and management software, and that's because, at least in the past, there have been nuances regarding monitoring software being accessible to the customer versus being accessible to the managed service provider. So we're going to work through that, but at the very least we can tell you that E-rate can provide monitoring and management remotely in some capacity. Bob, if you move me forward. So this is not specifically an E-rate subject, but it dovetails into this conversation. Atlantic has been working on and is spinning up a managed remote service to be introduced in 2015 to provide our customers a number of things that they ask us for sometimes anyway, regarding watching their wired network, watching the capacity on the wireless network, and helping them administer some of the tools that they have. We anticipate that this remote management and support service will be E-rate eligible. Bob, can you move forward? At this point, we see three offerings, a basic one, which includes watching for throughput, watching for problems, alerting and alarming, providing some feedback, keeping your inventory as a basic offering, and an advanced offering, which includes actually being the go-between for TAC and the customer, and to the extent possible managing airway, but in any case providing some of the information and the monitoring that we would have gotten from airwave anyway if we were looking at it directly or you were looking at it directly. And the third offering extends all the way down to managing ClearPass and taking care of some of the user problems. Now, it's important to point out that if all of these elements are not E-rateable, some of them certainly are, and it can be split into two different offerings. One is one that has E-rate application, and another one that would be strictly a contract kind of thing. So there are nuances here, like I said before, and we're working through them, but I wanted you to know that we're going to be offering some cloud-based managed service offerings going into 2015 to help take some of the burden off of watching the wireless network. I'm done now, Bob.
All right, we do have some questions that have come up. We were able to work through our technical difficulties. I have one question that has several parts, so I'm going to break that up into its component parts and let the appropriate presenter respond. The first part of the question is, what is the definition of Category 2 eligibility? Is it still based on free and reduced lunch numbers?
Yes, it is. Basic discount is absolutely based on free and reduced. They're using the same discount matrix. They're just doing on a district-wide basis, not an individual school basis. But they're using the same discount matrix, the same eligible kids divided by total kids method, producing a simple average, comparing that to the discount matrix. They're just doing it on a district-wide basis so that all schools in a particular district purchase at the same rate.
You may have already answered the second part of the question, but I'll state it just to be sure. The second part is, are districts still categorized the same as before in their refund rate? For example, previously we were refunded up to 40%. Will the same calculations be used for the Category 2 services?
Well, generally, but since everybody is doing their discount a little bit differently because it's district-wide, I would expect there is a possibility of some drift. Some schools will go from 60% to 80%. Some schools will go from 80% to 90%. Some schools go from 90 to 80. So I would imagine there's a chance that you'll your district will shift up or down a little bit in in the on how you come out discount wise.
Very good. All right, the next question is, if the district owns the equipment, how is the break fix defined? If a WAP needs to be troubleshooted, is this the district's responsibility to break fix it, or can the service provider be called in to fix it?
Okay, so this is a little bit longer answer because maintenance has been kind of an interesting topic at the FCC. So a few years ago, the FCC determined that your basic manufacturer warranty, like SmartNet, we'll use the Cisco brand just for illustrative purposes, that SmartNet contained services that were not eligible. For example, if you put SmartNet on a router and the router didn't break, the FCC decided that they were paying for services that were not being used. So they separated, they essentially said that those types of services were no longer going to be funded as a single cost model. There was a number of conversations back and forth between folks in the industry and the FCC, and essentially what they did was they separated the what used to be SmartNet into two components. There's the software pushes, patches, upgrades, and the phone support piece, and then there's the break fix piece. So what they determined was the software pushes, patches, and upgrades, and phone support, and the troubleshooting piece could be done as a fixed price offering with no proof no proof that you did anything. Essentially phone support is just phone support. It's, $100 on an access point or whatever the cost is, but they would just pay it, and they would pay it up front, and you didn't have to show them that you ever talked to anybody. They pay that regardless if you ever needed the service or not. Where the break fix piece, they decided it needed to be done on a time and material basis, so that essentially you'd apply for a maintenance contract with a provider that says we want to put essentially say $5,000 into a pool that covers the time and the materials for anything that happens to go wrong. But if nothing goes wrong, then that $5,000 would go back, and you would zero it out at the end of the year with your provider. The provider essentially it's a contract that wouldn't get fulfilled because nothing broke. So yes, the short answer is you can absolutely write a contract with a maintenance provider to provide time and materials maintenance on whatever piece of eligible equipment you want, but with the proviso that it's an estimate. It's got to be structured as time and materials, and if nothing under contract breaks, then the service provider is not going to collect any money. Does that answer your question?
Well, if that didn't answer the question for the person, they can certainly contact Steve Brown. He's already given his email address, sbrown@atlantic.com. Should we give another moment to allow any other questions to come through?
Well, we're under the wire by 4 minutes, so I think this is a good time to wrap it up. Just to summarize some of the things we've covered, E-rate is obviously changing. Funding is being refocused. The new focus is Wi-Fi. Atlantic Computing, many of you know us, is very focused on Wi-Fi in schools. We are an established E-rate service provider. The products we represent, our professional services, our managed services will all be available under C-rate funding, C2 funding, Category 2 funding. This is a program that was in a great deal of flux up until this past Tuesday. It's still in flux. I know some of the forms that Bob has described are still in flux and are to be fleshed out or to be released the first week in November. But we're going to be here to keep you abreast of the changes. We will do so via emails and information on our website. Thanks to everyone for attending, and have a great afternoon.